yeah, you can also use probably the chat to ask your questions if you would prefer that in another language, and then we could translate afterwards. So nice to see all of you here. This is the series Decolonizing Decoloniality. This is a series of conversations with scholars from all over the world. We are talking about the question, what conversations are actually happening in different institutions about decolonizing knowledge, what these conversations are about, and what the stakes are. And in today's session, we explore a cross-continental conversation between Indonesia and Germany. We have two speakers, Judith Schlehe from the University of Freiburg in Germany, and Sita Hidaya from the Gadjah Mada University in Indonesia. Sita Hidaya is a lecturer and researcher at the Department of Anthropology at UGM in Yogyakarta. She holds a PhD from the Freiburg University in Germany. She studied anthropology before at UGM and also at Florida International University. And she has conducted research on anthropology of religion, gender, law, and participatory digital ethnography. And last year, Sita held a fellowship at the University of Vienna, where I'm based. And she gave a very elaborate and interesting talk about conversations at UGM, at the Gadjah Mada University, about decolonizing anthropology in Indonesia. And this was, I was part of the lecture, and also Peggy Levitt was there, and this was so interesting that we thought that would be wonderful to invite Sita for our conversation here at the GDC as well. Our second speaker is Judith Schlehe from Freiburg University. She's a professor of social and cultural anthropology. She has published widely on anthropology of religion, popular culture, globalization, gender, and disaster. And she's worked in different parts of Indonesia doing ethnographic and anthropological research, and has in this process developed collaborations with anthropologists of Indonesia and anthropologists in Indonesia. And today we have invited her to talk about a very innovative model of transnational collaboration that she's pioneered between the University of Freiburg and the Gadjah Mada University. This is referred to as tandem research, and we will hear about what that means and how it might contribute to our conversations about decolonizing. So the setup of this discussion is, first I will ask you some questions. I will ask 3 questions basically to Sita and Judith, and then we also have some time for broader conversation with you as the audience. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And Peggy and Nora will moderate the chat, and will either read out the questions or give you the floor afterwards. Before we start then, I will have one more announcement, and that is that there is already the next lecture on May 20th with colleagues from Taiwan, and that is led by Hongzhen Wang.
Hi, nice to meet you. Okay, good.
So is everybody ready? Do we have any questions before we set off? No. Okay, there we go then. Our first question is about the big picture. What is actually, what does it actually mean to talk about decolonizing knowledge in Indonesia and in Germany? Which conversations are happening in your universities, and what are they about? And I will first ask Sita to talk about this question.
Thank you, Sanderien, and hello everyone. My name is Sita, and I would like to maybe share because I think that we experience coloniality in a different way than other area in the world. So the term decolonizing knowledge has received quite positive likes in Indonesia, in recent years, but there are generally three ways we Indonesians talk about decolonization. The first, we use the term in relation to the study of Indonesian independence war and the formal handing over the instrument of governments from the Dutch to Indonesia.
Excuse me, Sita, for interrupting, but I cannot hear you very well. Could you get a bit closer to the micro?
Okay. Is it clearer now? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So like I said earlier, thank you, Judith. There are generally three ways we Indonesian talk about decolonization. The first, we use the term in relation to the study of Indonesian independence war and the formal handing over the instrument of government from the Dutch to Indonesia in 1945, 1950. And I think it's important to show you an example of the use of the term decolonization is the Indonesia 1945-1950 project, which was conducted in 2019 by the Institute of War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies, the Royal Netherlands Institute of Southeast Asia Caribbean Studies, and the Netherlands Institute for Military History. The second way we speak of decolonization is the way Indonesians aim to rediscover and recover, erase local knowledge, and to construct and to legitimize alternative epistemologies and methodologies. And also we aim, when we use the word decolonization, we aim to end dependence on theories, interpretation, of existing Western knowledge, and place more emphasis on the formation of new and more suitable knowledge for Indonesian. I think that's how we talk about decolonization in the university mostly, and it's usually state university. Example of this kind of conversations are promoted by Indonesian National Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN, and also the various state university in Indonesia, and also Islamic State University and my own university. But the second way of understanding decolonization, the conversation around decolonizing knowledge usually aim to transform Indonesia, which according to our or maybe some of Indonesians also think that Indonesia usually regarded only as a laboratory for a Western social scientists, and we try to transform ourselves to be also a producer, and we would like to reclaim knowledge about ourselves, about Indonesia. And these two ways of talking about decolonization are different in a way that the first group believe that colonization has ended, and the second group believes that coloniality still exists. So within this discussion, we heard about indigenizing knowledge, nationalizing knowledge, Islamization of knowledge, and also maybe a little bit unusual open scholarship. When we talk about this, usually we are meant to talk about decolonization knowledge. And many scholars find a juncture between decolonization practices with post-colonial theory. And in recent years, especially in conversation with feminists and leftist civil organizations, decolonization has increasingly focused on practices that challenge both the assumption and effect of coloniality of knowledge. But this conversation consider epistemic decolonization as an act of liberation and act of solidarity. In this way, decolonization is increasingly focused on critical action that focus on the future of people, the marginalized people, and in solidarity to build better Indonesia. So, for example, usually civil society supporting Papuan aspiration and also movement also speak of decolonizing knowledge in Indonesia. And within this group also there are efforts to disseminate decolonizing knowledge in Indonesia. I noticed there are at least 3 very important books being translated. First, the Decolonizing Methodology by Linda Tuhiwai Smith in 2014 by Insist. And then also the translation of Feminists Without Borders, Decolonizing Theory, Practicing Solidarity by Chandra Talpade Mohanty. And also the publication of Introduction to Decolonizing Knowledge in 2023 by Lingkar Studi Sejarah Arungkala. So there's no writer in this book. So they just mentioned that this is produced by a study circle, a history study circle, so which is interesting for me because it's communal writers and they do not write individually in the book. So many young people actually talk about decolonizing knowledge in the 3rd sense. For example, I mean, the most popular ones are Fajri Siregar from Amsterdam University and Tamara Soukota from Vrije University in the Netherlands. I think that's maybe the way 3 different ways we talk about decolonizing knowledge in Indonesia. And in my university, I think in general, we talk about decolonizing knowledge in the 2nd sense. So that's we try to rediscover and also to reclaim also our local knowledge and also to legitimize alternative epistemologies and methodologies. I think we are still in this kind of discussion. And in our department, Department of Anthropology, Gadjah Mada University, we try to create a curriculum that perhaps not using the decolonizing as a in the 3rd way, but I think we focus on, for example, what knowledge and ways of knowing are given priority. So, and we are now talking about against and point to coloniality of education. And also we try to reestablish a relationship with communities. So we tend to focus more on applied time and place-based case studies. And I think we are not focused on reaching like universal theories, but I mean, universalism is an aspiration, but not a goal in our education. And then interrogate, alienating, and essentializing scientific concept and theories. For example, law, gender. I mean, there's a lot of way of talking about gender and law that's different from the establishing theories and assumption. And then our courses are now getting more engaged. So I think the theories are getting lesser now compared to the 2014 curriculum. And also we try to increase language proficiency, both ethnic and international languages among our students. So because there's a assumption of monolingualism of others in anthropology, unfortunately, and that's how anthropology department tries to decolonizing knowledge from our experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Sita. Yeah, we will pick up on these themes later. I'm very interested to hear more about all of this, and there will be more scope to ask questions also for the audience. But for now, let's move to Judith. Would you also like to share with us a little bit about the big picture? How does decolonizing knowledge matter in Germany? Where are conversations happening, and what kind of conversations are those? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sanderien, for this nice introduction and the invitation, and many thanks to Sita for this very comprehensive overview, where I already learned a lot from. Yeah, talking about decoloniality in Germany and then in my university, from which I retired 1.5 years ago, is of course something that is quite difficult in a few minutes, but I would like to refer very briefly to the difference between the public discourse and the academic discourse. The public discourse until a decade ago was more focusing on the Holocaust and on the Nazi time in the Second World War, and the collective, or the memory, the politics of memory was mainly referring to these years. Whereas now, in the last decade or a bit more, the colonial history also of Germany became more prominent. As you might probably know, Germany did not have colonies in Indonesia, or in what is today Indonesia, but in other parts of the world, only from around 1880 on until the end of the First World War, or until 1990, so not a very long period. But at the same time, we should emphasize that there were German colonies, both in Africa, as probably everybody knows, but also in New Guinea, in the Pacific, in Samoa, and many other parts. So there were German colonies, and the impact of colonization is not much less than the impact of colonization of the more famous, let's say, famous colonizers. The discipline of anthropology is connected to that in the sense that the early years of anthropology in the late 19th century started with museums where all kinds of things were collected that both colonizers and missionaries and early travelers brought home to Germany, and that constituted the first big museums. And only after that, anthropology as an academic discipline was established in several universities. So the beginning of anthropology was informed by that zeitgeist, by these ideologies, and by these political structures of inequality in these years. But at the same time, anthropology from the very beginning on focused on the everyday life of people abroad in these years. And there was a division of disciplines, meaning that, for example, the so-called world religions and the so-called high cultures were organized or institutionalized mostly in the philological disciplines, whereas the social sciences, sociology, social anthropology, cultural anthropology, and what was Völkerkunde in Germany back then was more or less focusing on the everyday life and on the structures in what we now call the global South. So the own culture was back then not included in the understanding of anthropology. That changed, of course, considerably. And that also had to do with the most prominent method of anthropology, doing field work, empirical field work, where the anthropologist, him or herself, is personally involved and where he or she automatically discovers a lot of commonalities, not only differences, but also commonalities. I think we will come back to that point later. So in more recent years, the efforts to decolonize anthropology is, on the one hand, following the public discourse that is still very much focusing on material culture, on the restitution of artifacts, of things that have been stolen or in an illegal way appropriated and that are still displayed in our museums. So the public discourse is mainly focusing on the restitution of these artifacts, of the material things, whereas the academic part of anthropology, the university part of anthropology, is more, I would say, more focusing on what we discussed today, the decolonization of knowledge and the epistemological inequalities. So this is, of course, a bit polarizing, but it's just a tendency that I want you to be aware of. This also leads us to the situation in my university, the University of Freiburg, where we quite recently have new initiatives to decolonize. The most prominent initiative is called Decoloniality Now, referring to the fact that coloniality is not something of the past, but something that we are still and always dealing with. That's what we learned already from post-colonial theories and debates, that it's not only about political structures and it's not only about material or financial or political inequalities, but it's also something that we have internalized and that we implicitly and often unconsciously reproduce in our epistemologies and in our way to understand the world and ourselves. So the Freiburg initiative, Decoloniality Now, focuses on the impact of coloniality on today's world, the ongoing impact, and the asymmetries of knowledge production that are also part of this initiative here. An important part of that, and I'm sure also referring to what Sita was just saying and explaining, is the ongoing structural inequality in the academic systems, in the institutional framework in which we are all working and from which we are more or less depending, both the universities and the funding organizations and foundations that still, or in an ongoing way, shape the conditions in which we are working and struggling and in which we try to overcome these inequalities and injustices. So in our university, we have this initiative that strives to overcome the division between social sciences and humanities. But until today, it's more or less reduced to lecture series, to discussions, to public and academic debates, but there is not that much practical work coming out of that. And that probably will lead us to our main issue today, what we tried to establish already 20 years ago.
Wonderful. So that's a good overview from both sides, and leads us also immediately to the practical, I wouldn't say solution, but maybe suggestion that the two of you have worked on together, and that is tandem research. So Judith has, like you said, started working on this for a long time, more than 20 years ago. You have collaborated with anthropologists, for example, Dr. Gabriel Lono, Sima Tupang, Dr. Anna-Marie Vatti, Dr. Pandey Made Negra, and Professor Pooja Samedi, and more recently with Sita. So these are all professors and lecturers from the Gadjah Mada University in Yogyakarta. And so it is called cross-cultural, cross-continental, transnational collaboration. What form does it take actually? What does it mean? Could you give us some insights?
Let me start with a weak point. So far, we do not have a really good title for our model. Even after 20 years, we are still struggling with this very sober designation as tandem or team, reciprocal, and of course, transnational tandem and teamwork. And we would be happy if some of the participants had a great idea how we could sell our model in a more effective way by inventing an interesting title. Okay, but let me first explain what it is. And as I mentioned already, we started in 2004, so we will have our 20th anniversary this year. We started with a student exchange program between, as Sanderien explained already, between UGM, Universitas Gadjah Mada, and the University of Freiburg, and the two departments of anthropology, both here and there. We started from the necessity to organize fieldwork training for our students in a practical manner and in an innovative manner, meaning that I thought the time is over where I can train my students doing fieldwork exercise in the conventional manner, the lonely hero model that anthropology was relying on for a long time, the lonely hero who goes to the so-called field for a limited period of time, collects data, goes home, analyzes the data, and writes it up. So that's very, that's something that we wanted to overcome. And the first step was that we made our students working together in tandems and teams, both German and Indonesian students. Forgive me if I'm nationalizing. Of course, we had in our German university, we also had students from other national backgrounds, and at Gadjah Mada sometimes as well. But just to make it easier, I'm talking of Germans and Indonesians, meaning the German and the Indonesian university, students of both universities. So I took them to Yogyakarta for only 4 weeks, and they did fieldwork exercise together with their Indonesian tandem or team partners on an umbrella topic that the lecturers from UGM and me decided in advance. So under that umbrella topic, each tandem or team could develop its own subtopic and do fieldwork exercise on that together for 4 weeks. And we had workshops where we discussed their experiences, both professionally and personally, what experiences they made when they worked together. And we did our very best also to make them live together. So that means that the German students joined the Indonesian students in their everyday life as far as possible, living in the dormitories where they lived. So this is something that is not so exceptional, that we collaborate with the local colleagues and bring perspectives from different backgrounds together. What was more innovative was that the following year, the Indonesian students came to Germany, to Freiburg, and did with their tandem partners and new German students fieldwork on a similar topic in the German context. So that's what we call the reciprocity that is so crucial and so simple. And until today, I'm surprised that this is not the normal thing in anthropology and in social sciences. It should be, in my view, in our view, it should be something that should be practiced in all kinds of fieldwork, not only in student training, not only in fieldwork exercises, but also on the level of PhD students and on the level of research projects. So we should always aim to develop research practices that seek to overcome the colonial hierarchies within the global system of knowledge production. And we can do that only if we bring people and perspectives together, but not in a stable and fixed and essentializing way. But, and this is something that I would like to emphasize very much, in a flexible or inflexible constellations and in critical reflexivity. What I mean is that the national background, the positionality that we all bring with us when we do fieldwork, is not always the crucial or the most crucial aspect. It can be gender, it can be religious affiliation, it can be the specific personal, subcultural or identification. So that it can be class background, experience, it can be the disciplinary background. There are so many intersecting differences, and it's not always, or it should not be always taken for granted that the perspectives of, in our case, German and Indonesian students are fixed to their national affiliation or identification.
Okay.
So just to explain briefly, the basic idea is that it's not a bicultural, but a multi-positional and multi-relational model that brings people together and brings perspectives together, turns them around, not only by turning around the perspective of the so-called insider and the so-called outsider, but being aware of the fact that that depends on the topics, that depends on the people, that depends on the personal experience, and it also depends on other constellations, the when we talk of field work, it's not always the researcher and the so-called researched. It can be also a collaboration, or it should be a collaboration between the anthropologists and their research participants. And that's why I personally, until today, I'm very happy with the topic that we had many years ago, an umbrella topic that we called academic cultures, and invest in exploration and investigation of academic cultures, because that included ourselves, and that again made or overcame that that difference between the researcher and the researched, and the insider and the outsider. So this is just the basic structure: reciprocity, multi-perspectivity, bringing perspectives together, discussing them, turning them around, playing with them in flexible ways, and then, and that's the last point, extending that also to the level of PhD students, where we also managed to create tandems between Indonesian and German, between a Mongolian and a German, and between a Swiss and a Cameroonian. So far, only these 3 tandems, but it's, I think it's important to mention that as well. It's not only a student program, and my or our aim would be to extend the program, and that's why I'm so happy that we have the chance today to introduce it to you, to extend that also to other levels of research projects, where we should do much more to convince our funding organizations, and where we should strive to alter the system or the politics of funding and of research designs and proposals in the way that we can deal with more, or in more inclusive and open constellations.
Thank you.
So that's for the moment.
Yeah, good. I will, ask Sita what you have to add, and also I put in the chat for all of you a link to the article that Judith and Sita wrote together to introduce their tandem research ID. Sita, the question is, of course, how do people at UGM think about the tandem project in general, and how do they experience the implementation? And also how you personally have, you've been participant as a student initially, and now as an organizer, coordinator of this program. What is your perspective? I cannot hear you. I think you're muted, Sita.
Professor Schlehe has explained remarkably well. So in my opinion, this tandem research is a process where the central concepts and proposition, decision makings, fundings in the research do not originate in or privilege a single culture, like for example German culture, but are derived from and relevant to multiple cultures, which is German and both German and Indonesia. That's maybe my department would think that way, but my personal opinion about the program is that this project actually marks the transition from Indonesian as the research and Indonesian as researchers, like Professor Schlehe have stated before. And I think it's also important to highlight that this project is investing in the empowerment of Indonesian students' way of knowing, and also to value them equal to their German partners. I mean, like for universities in Europe or in the US, this kind of feeling would not be like, what is this? But for us, it's really important that we feel like we are empowered and we are equal to our partners, and that so I think this is what the Tandem project means to me, and maybe, yeah, at least that's my personal opinion. Also in my opinion, I consider every group a success despite many shortcomings, but there are also challenges we I think it's beyond our power. The biggest challenge for this kind of project usually has to do with the immigration process. So I mean, but yeah, we still managed to overcome this. But yeah, it's been 20 years, so I think it's a success. Thank you.
What do you mean, the immigration process?
Visa process, because for example, we need, yeah, like immigration, like for example, we need 10 documents that includes the statement that we will return to Indonesia, or that we are employed, or we are a student, or we have enough money, we have yeah, all kinds of I don't think sometimes it changed the language of the designation of this document. So sometimes what does it mean? Like, for example, like what do you want from us? Sometimes you are like, sometimes you also need to present your family card, we call, like who's your parents and are, because our names, we do not have a surname. So our names, all the first and second are our personal names. So sometimes we need to bring our document which states that we are the child of someone. Like, for example, it's like, it has nothing to do with anything, but like we have to, yeah, because our name do not have surname. So for us, sometimes we have, and we also have to apply for visa appointment to submit these documents, and it's usually available only 2 days in a month. So we have to actually, yeah, schedule our life around these dates, basically. Otherwise, there's gonna be no appointment time, and then there's the process won't even start. So and sometimes also it takes months, the process. So for us, it's really daunting, the processes.
That's also huge challenges for the coordinators and the teachers to plan all of that carefully and to ensure that the students go through every step in time. And
yes,
yeah.
And most of students never actually travel abroad. So can you imagine, some of them are never fly airplane. So it's really, for them, it's sometimes it's yeah,
daunting. Linking this back to the conversations that you introduced at the beginning, the changes in the curriculum that you have discussed, the long-term efforts to rethink how anthropology is done in Indonesia. What is maybe the conversation that the department has about the Tandem research model?
Oh.
You are again muted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So our department continued to develop our collaborative research, and now we have 4 collaborative research with Zurich, with Michigan, and also with Leiden, Köln. Yeah, we have a lot of with the different formats, and we also have this kind of like, so we have like a classical training, ethnographic trainings, for example, when you have to do like your individual research, but then you also train to do collaborative research. I think this is one of the, now we can say that this is maybe one of the unique characteristic of our department, that we also teach not only the classical training, but also this tandem collaborative international, sometimes with like 5 universities, with local universities, with Indonesian universities, and also like international universities. So I think we are kind of now embed this kind of collaborative research into kind of like a method teaching. Like, so we have one classical and one this collaborative, where you don't do research alone, but with teams. I think that's the how our department perceive this, and it's I think it's very beneficial for students also to have this exposure and to gain actually confidence in doing research better, and also to learn to have a language proficiency, and also to have this maybe intercultural skills. So I think it's important for our students, and the department fully support this.
Yeah.
This.
Okay. One last question then for you, Sita, before I go back to ask last question to Judith and then give over to the audience. You have both emphasized a lot the teaching and the relationships that the students are developing, including PhD students. And Judith already suggested that it could be expanded more to research. So I wanted to ask you, do you yourself have experience as a researcher in tandem work, or maybe some of your colleagues, and what are the experiences there?
Mm-hmm. I've done also collaborative research and writing with fellow PhDs in Freiburg, and also alumni. We wrote articles together, for example, and I think it's doable. But both of us, or actually, I have a lot of pairs doing research and writing together, but especially from the Freiburg, because we were all alumni of this tandem. So we are used to have this kind of like relationship. So I think we've been, like, for example, I wrote with Ingo Roher, and we were the first alumni of this project. So like, it's sometimes we don't even like, we don't have like to talk every day or what. Sometimes we just read text draft, and that's it, because we are used to different way of communication and different way of doing things. I think we are more I think it's a skill that you need to actually to train as anthropologists, because otherwise, you know, it's different when I do with other people, maybe because you need to get to know the people and how to know how to communicate better. But because we were both alumni of this program, we know like we need what to do with to discuss better, to do research better, maybe like that. Yeah. So I think it's very possible.
Okay, there's also already interesting questions coming through the chat. My last question for Judith is, before I actually give over to Peggy, who will moderate the discussion. Judith, I know I've met the people who are following up now at the University of Freiburg, Professor Michele Haug and Dr. Mechtild van Vakano, and I met them last year in Indonesia, and I met the Indonesian and German students who were doing the work at the time. So what this shows is that they're very enthusiastic. They want to continue this in the future. And I also now hear from Sita that the UGM is expanding it to other in international collaboration, including other Asian countries. So if you take a step back and think about the wider implementation possibilities or application, what do you see as the contribution, but also the challenges of this approach for the future?
Yeah, first of all, I would like very briefly to come back to a topic that Sita has just raised. That was the visa problem, and we could think of institutional and practical challenges in a more broader sense. All of our universities promote internationalization, but in fact, both the state with the immigration laws and the visa problems and the universities, the institutional structures do not much to support innovative programs, and they do not much to make it easier for scholars to meet, for example, for conferences or for joint fieldwork, as in our case. That also has to do with the financial structure, and this is something that we should briefly mention. For many years, the money came from Germany, from different sources, mainly the German Academic Exchange Service, the DAAD. We had a lot of support from them, and we are very grateful, but we are especially happy that now the funding comes from both universities. So UGM is 100% financially independent, and as Sita was saying, the department supports our program and other programs that took up that model and expanded it to in other contexts. So the Gadjah Mada University, or at least the anthropological department there, spends a lot of money for these programs, and the University of Freiburg does that as well. So now we are also on that structural level really equal. Both universities fund or support their students. Of course, there are also problems involved, but that's the general picture. And another point that might also lead to Sanderien's question is that I wanted to mention that during the pandemic, we also managed to adapt our program. Of course, in these years, we were forced to reduce it to the digital space. We had virtual seminars, and not only for preparing students, but also for the fieldwork that was also only in the digital space. But we again made our students to collaborate in tandems and teams. It was successful in the sense that our students made the best out of it, and that they learned also to collaborate in the digital space. But at the same time, and this is quite important, I think, for the future of all our disciplines, at the same time, we realized that once collaboration and once fieldwork is reduced only to verbal conversations and to this reduced space of the laptop screen or of the handphone screen, we lose so much, because the personal contact and the immersion and the involvement in the everyday life, in all these informal things, the serendipity that is so important in anthropology, where we can learn about things that we did not think of when we developed our research design. All these things, and the emotional factors that are always involved in fieldwork and in collaboration between scholars, as well as the trust that we need when we, for example, share our primary data. All these things were quite complicated in the digital space, and we realized that although there are wonderful new possibilities to overcome physical distance, to overcome visa problems, to overcome financial things, to overcome the pollution that is connected to taking airplanes. So all these advantages that we have when we do digital or when we practice digital collaboration, all these advantages are counterbalanced by the losses that we have when we do not meet personally and when we do not learn to work together, and when we cannot share the life world, the everyday life world of our research participants. So this is something that I wanted to emphasize when I come back to Sanderien's question. I think in the future, of course, we should combine both ways to collaborate. And we did that, or my successor, Michaela Haug, already did that quite successfully together with Sita, that they prepared the students together. So the preparations were in digital seminars, in digital collaboration. But then, fortunately, the pandemic is over. Then they had the, let's say, classical physical encounter, doing fieldwork exercise together for 4 weeks here and for at least 4 weeks there. And this is once more something that I would like to suggest, that perhaps also in other disciplines, in other social science disciplines at least, we could strive to convince our universities and our funding agencies that the research designs, the research proposals, the idea of doing empirical research should be opened up to this kind of, not to this one kind of collaboration, but with an ongoing process of experimenting with sometimes only situational collaborations. It doesn't have to be a fixed team or tandem for a year or for several years. It can be just for a few days or perhaps only for one day. But it's the basic idea of decentering the power structure and the inequality that is involved in the conventional constellation of conducting empirical fieldwork. So what I see, or what I would like to suggest, is that all of us think of ideas of new possibilities to overcome this idea of working alone, collaborate with not only team partners or tandem partners from our own discipline, but also from other disciplines. And that's something that I also would like to refer to briefly, that we did that for a few years. We had international relations, political science also involved, both from UGM, from Yogyakarta, and from Germany, and then also from another Indonesian university in Makassar. And that was also extremely interesting, because these intersecting differences that I talked about before, these intersecting differences became even more complex then, because we had these disciplinary backgrounds and the different methods and methodologies, the different ideas of what scientific work and scientific methods mean.
Okay.
So that was also something that was enriching on the one hand, but coming back to what Sanderien said before, it also meant a lot of organizational work, and that brings me to the very practical, down-to-earth challenges. Sometimes it's getting too much and too complex to organize these things for many universities, for many faculties, for many colleagues, for many students. It would need at least, basically, it would need a person who does nothing else. And that's why we came back to the beginning, and now we are very modest in only collaborating between the two of us. But that doesn't mean that we do not want to propagate the idea of using that model in all directions to extend our perspectives, not only with colleagues from other universities and other national backgrounds, but also from other disciplines.
Wonderful. Thank you both very much. I want to point at one other example from Indonesia, although they don't refer to your publication, but it's in the book Plantation Zone by Pooja Samedi and Tanya Lee. And the appendix, there is also a reflection on how they work together as a tandem, although they don't call it a tandem. One of the challenges that they described that they struggled with is how they also fell back into maybe the roles that they inherited from the colonial past. And for example, the role of the gatekeeper or the translator or the broker that the Indonesian anthropologist then takes up for the foreign anthropologist. And how they then discuss this together and try to invent ways of doing things differently, but how also this could be sometimes not always so easy. So maybe a very interesting read for all of you as well. Peggy, I've seen that there are quite a few chat questions already. Do you have your own question maybe as well? Would you like to take over? Yeah.
I think Nora's going to take over, and
Okay.
then we'll help out. So thank you. And thank you for such great comments and great leading, Sanderien.
Thank you so much for this first part of the conversation. It was really, very inspiring, I guess is the word. It feels like a word that's used too much, but it was. And thank you everyone for being here. Apologies to the people who are joining us just now. There seems to have been some confusion with indicating the different times, so we're sorry about that. There are a few questions in the chat already. Ines, would you like me to read it, or do you want to ask your question now? The question from Ines. Hi.
Hi, hello everyone. As I put on my chat, was
I think I don't know if it's just me. I can't hear you super well. The connection is maybe now it's working.
how is it now?
Good.
Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I really learned a lot from Indonesia to Germany. So for me, it's just really a question about the meaning of decolonizing knowledge. According to what I've read in this, the global South has to produce its or their knowledge, which is something that if we can produce our own concepts, we can have our own definitions. But to reach that point, we only do through research. But the research depends on funds, and we don't have that funds. And the funds, again, are coming from the Western or global North. So that is my concern. So how can we be decolonized if we don't have a way or means that technology? I don't know if my question is it?
Thank you, Ines.
Hello.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, there's a
Have you
small
got it?
delay,
It wasn't that clear to
but
me.
we
Perhaps you can repeat it.
But please, you can read it in chat.
yeah, we have a written version in the chat. So the question is about funding and how can we decolonize knowledge if we depend on the global north to conduct research. Yeah. And how can indigenous knowledge be considered recognizable knowledge that we can rely on?
Exactly. Thank you.
Judith, would you like to answer or? Okay. So maybe based on our experience from my university's experience, I think at the beginning of this project, the fund came from Germany, almost all of them. Like I think in the first 10 years, maybe maybe the first 10 years, and then after that, my department started to write a proposal to my university and to say that we need to fund this program. And because we have like 10 years history and it has always been successful, so then the university, my university also agrees to fund, at least for Indonesian students. So we no longer depend on the German money at this point, and now it's established that we will fund our students ourselves, like also with the yeah, I mean it takes 10 years, and we built our maybe portfolio in a way that like it takes 10 years for everyone to believe like in the project, like also. And then in this year now we even managed to convince the Ministry of Higher Education to fund our department with a bigger fund. So then we are able to actually build an application and to own our own server. And now we're actually the application has to do with data management and also collaborative analysis. So we have built this application for the need of this kind of tandem project. So for example, like we have for example chat, we can discuss data in this application. So I think we haven't found any application out there who can actually accommodate collaborative research. That's why. But it takes like time to build this experience and also this confidence and also this, you know, to understand ourselves, to understand the need of to produce good knowledge. I think it takes 20 years basically to be able to be here now. Like, yeah. So maybe it's, I don't know. That's from Indonesian perspective, yeah, experience.
Yeah, thank you very much for these questions. First to Ines, this is a very broad question about epistemology and the recognition of indigenous knowledge. I would say in anthropology in general, but hopefully also in other disciplines, decolonization of knowledge means to give up this idea of a truth claim, of a bounded knowledge. So we are producing knowledge in the sense that this is the truth. That's something that we in anthropology strive to overcome. And in our program, we emphasize much more to the collaboration or the integration, and sometimes also the debate between perspectives and positions and positionalities. So it's not about the truth or knowledge that claims to be objective. We understand our world and the world in general much better if we bring perspectives together, and if we understand how we ourselves and other people make sense of their worlds. So this is the idea of the knowledge production that overcomes this fixed idea of objective truth. And I think this is quite important, that we do not, in a categorical sense, divide empirical knowledge, local, so-called local knowledge, and theoretical knowledge. Because as Sita said in her very first statement, in Indonesia, we have now, or not only now, we have for 20 years already, discussions about Islamic knowledge, and we have debates and wonderful publications about theories from the South. But then what is a theory? What is categorized as a theory, and where is the limit, or where is the border? What's the difference to empirical knowledge? So this emic-etic difference that we had in anthropology for a long time, we try to overcome, and we do our very best to see all kinds of knowledge as positioned, coming from a certain social position and from a certain personal position, and bringing these perspectives together, not in order to harmonize them necessarily, not in order to say this is the better and this is the minor one, but to realize in which context, which kind of experience makes more sense in order to understand the world, and including ourselves, always including ourselves, not the other, but all of us. So this is what I would say to Ines. To Nick's question, I think, and that refers back to what Sita was saying, that it took 2 decades to come to the present state.
Sorry, so just Judith, I'm just interrupting you. I don't know if everyone can read the chat, but Nick's question is about practical ways to get started with these kinds of collaborations. So how to start with that?
Yeah, thank you. I would come back to what I said before. I think I would be happy if one outcome of our debate today would be that all of you try to convince your university or your funding organizations that this is an important and innovative way to decolonize universities, to decolonize the world, and to learn much more, and to produce much better so-called data. I don't like the word data, that's why I say so-called. When we do it, or when we bring as many perspectives and as many intersecting differences as possible together. Not in the sense of fixing differences, but in the sense of playing with them and reflecting them and learning from them. And very practically, I think it's our task to change the structures and to write proposals where we do not apply for a researcher and his or her assistant or interpreter or local guide, but writing proposals where we apply for funding for collaborators. And this not only in our own society, but in all over the global world. So my dream would be that in future, it's not only Indonesia, Germany, it's hopefully also other continents and other countries and other universities being involved without exaggerating and making it too complicated. Because again, I think that's something that Sita also knows a lot about it. It's not only about structures, it's not only about funding, it's very much also about persons and their enthusiasm and their openness and flexibility. And that's why, once more, I think the digital space doesn't give us the chances that we have when we have these personal encounters. But this personal aspect of collaboration is so crucial in all kinds of institutional structures, and we cannot overestimate that. So we need people who convince the administrations and the funding organizations with good and interesting and innovative proposals, but then we also need people who want to open up themselves and their ideas and their personal engagement in order to create friendships, or Sita would say comradeship, with all kinds of other people.
Thank you, Judith. Sita, I don't know if you also want to add to this or maybe take the next question, whichever, the next question. I don't know if, I'm sorry, I don't have the full name, so HC wants to ask it in person. Should I read it?
Yeah.
Which would you prefer?
Professor Wong, go ahead.
Okay, good. That's me.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I really enjoy the talk from Judith and from Sita, and it's really inspiring. And I'm working as an administrator at a university, so this kind of collaborative project between UGM and Freiburg University is pretty inspiring. And I have one question for Sita, is that in the academic community, I think there is always institutional arrangement or academic governance that encourage the scholars to do this, to do that. And I'm wondering, how is the academic governance at UGM that encourage you to teach or to do the kind of decolonization knowledge? And okay, this is for Sita. And another question for Judith is that when the two university students work and live and study together, and I think more or less you give them some curriculum or to guide them to discuss. And I'm wondering, is there any materials that is from Indonesian local or indigenous academic output that is very different from Western epistemology? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor. So at UGM and also actually the whole Ministry of Education, promote collaborative and so-called participatory education. I mean, it's started in 2021, where the government actually proposed this Merdeka Belajar, Kampus Merdeka, independent freedom study and campus freedom. It's so-called, this jargon are used by the Ministry of Education. It's being promoted to all education institutions in Indonesia. And now my university support this to the point that almost all research, almost funds available are in the form of collaborative research. Almost all. I mean, it's rarely now. I think it's the minority of funds now available for an individual research or one group research, not collaborative with other universities. Not only, I mean, this collaborative not only with international university, but also multidisciplinary within university or with other universities in Indonesia. But there are like so many funds available for us now, but mostly collaborative and so-called participatory. I mean, we are struggling to actually do it because it's only in 2021 with a new, we call it curriculum, freedom or Campus Merdeka, freedom campus. It's like a very weird situation, but now we have more network. So there's a lot, the number of networks being built is like exponentially growth. The growth is exponential, not like now, for example, my department we call it so-called partners, maybe 18 Indonesian partners and 21 international partners, because we support this collaborative and participatory. And most of our, I think the biggest fund for us we get is the application and the server, and where the application actually it is participatory because the villagers or the community can actually access to this application. So not only the researcher who would access and who would, for example, chat in the application, but also the villagers who we done study. So the money is there for us to be accessed. I think that's the current situation in Indonesia. So the majority of funds now is a collaborative research fund.
Thank you, Sita.
Perhaps I would immediately continue. You ask about the differences in epistemology. If you ask if there are if there is knowledge from Indonesian local or indigenous tradition that is different from Western epistemology. Of course it is. There are differences in our ways of training students, not only students, but from early childhood on. Our institutions differ, our cultural contexts differ, but I wish to avoid essentializations and generalizations, because as I tried to explain before, apart from national and disciplinary backgrounds, there are many other differences. So, for example, a German female student might understand certain aspects of gender roles in Indonesia differently from a male Indonesian students. Or an example that I have cited many times already was from the very first generation. Sita already mentioned Ingo Rohrer, who also is a colleague now and who was part of the first generation and tandem program. He and his female Indonesian tandem partner, they explored the gender roles in the Indonesian punk and hardcore scene back in 2005. And it became, they reflected it very openly, and it became quite obvious that in many senses he, who back then was also part of that subculture, Ingo was, the German, was a punk back then, and he was subculturally closer to the Indonesian punk and hardcore scene than his Indonesian female tandem partner, who was from a very bourgeois background and had never ever anything to do with the punk and hardcore scene before. So I give that example to emphasize once more that it's not only about national backgrounds and national differences and disciplinary training, that it's also about the personal affiliation and other structural positionalities that influence our ways to perceive the field and the world that we encounter, but also the way how we are perceived by our research participants. If we have time for another brief example, because sometimes storytelling is more convincing than abstract words. The before mentioned PhD tandem working in Cameroon and in Germany, Switzerland, they realized that the Cameroonian, the local anthropologist, the indigenous anthropologist, learned much more about negative sides in Cameroon, all the problems and the difficulties that their research participants had, especially when he talked alone with them, compared to his Swiss partner, who was presented all the positive sides, because the research participants wanted to give a positive image of their country, and perhaps they also wanted to be engaged in a personal relationship with that female anthropologist, whatever. So it's not only the positionality of the perspectives of the researcher, but also of the research participants that can generate very different information and very different connotations. And that's why, once more, we can enrich our research outcomes when we bring these very different perspectives together. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to break in because we're on 90 minutes, and I think we had a wonderful, inspiring discussion. We also realized there's much work to do, practical work, as well as, of course, continuing our conceptual work. I want to thank both of you for sharing your experiences. I want to also thank all the audiences for sharing their questions. I don't know if all the questions really got answered, but there will be more conversations and you will be invited for them. Yeah, so please keep in touch with us. Please share your ideas if you have other suggestions for future events like this that we could host or co-organize together with you. Yes, and have a very nice day or evening wherever you are. Keep up the good work, and yeah, we will be in touch for more.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great.
Please join
Thank
us on 20
you. That's
May
great.
for the Taiwan conversation. Don't forget.
Thank you. Thank you for your blessing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank